fun memory pop into my head this morning, and by fun I mean one of the more embarrassing things I've ever done in my life.
Well, do tell.
So first of all, I should tell you that I never a smooth mover when it came to romance or anything like that.
I like where the story is going already.
My wife always had to make the first move in any regard, because I was always like, well, I'd hold your hand if that was something you wanted to do. I don't want to be forward or untoward. Anyway, my wife and I are, I don't know if we were married at this point or about to get married. No, we were not married yet. We were about a year out from being married. We'd been dating for about 8 years.
Okay.
And we're in Los Angeles, and a friend of ours who had started making it big in his career, and by making it big, I mean he was third assistant to some actor, invited us to a movie premiere. And it was our first movie premiere in Los Angeles. It was at the beautiful Fox Theater in Westwood, California, right by UCLA. It's an old 1920s, 30s, gigantic theater. I think it's where they did the premiere for Star Wars. I don't remember, but it's a beautiful old theater. And we get in there, and they give you your free popcorn and your free soda and your free candy bar or whatever. I'm like, oh boy, don't we feel like bigwigs? We're in a movie theater premiere. This is amazing. And we're coming out of the movie, and there's a huge crushing crowd. And my wife is significantly shorter than I am. She's about 5'1". I'm like 5'8". And she's standing right in front of me. And I turn, as the crowd is milling forward, everyone trying to get out, a few thousand people trying to get out. As the crowd is milling forward, I turn to talk to my friend who had invited us. And I turned back, and as you do as a husband or a boyfriend, I kind of nuzzle my chin into the back of my wife's head and give her a little kiss on the top of her scalp, right from the back of her head.
Yeah, as you do.
As one does. A kind of sweet little, just like we're walking through a crowd and we're stuck together. I'm just give you a little smooch. Anyway, the slow turnaround of a head that is not my wife's reveals a woman's face that is horrified that I have just nuzzled into the back of her head and kissed her scalp line. And I've just admitted that I am not smooth in any way, shape, or form, have just done the most horrifying act I've ever done in my life. And I immediately go, I'm so sorry. Oh God.
Gloria, I need your help.
I'm literally like looking around going, Mom. Like it was that kind of, and then my wife, who is standing right next to the woman, realizes what's just happened and goes, what? Like literally the look on her face is like, what are you doing? I was like, I thought it was you.
And all of a sudden Dave turns into Lou Costello.
Brad, I have to explain to you that I never have my cheeks been more red hot. Just you could have cooked an egg on my cheeks. And my hands immediately flop sweat, both palms, and I'm like, and I'm trying to, and there's no way to not look like a creep in the situation because I was a creep. Like, I was the creep in the situation. This poor woman is just trying to walk out of a movie theater, and I give her a smooch on the back of her head, and she's like, who the hell are you? And so my wife, thank God for my wife, she steps in and he goes, you'll have to excuse him. He's an idiot.
Oh my God.
So, Brad, when it comes time, I want to say this as a parent, when it comes time, if you need me to talk to your children about how to date in the world and how to be successful, call anyone else but me. Don't call me. I am not your source.
I might actually have them call you because I could see some benefit to this. I certainly don't have to worry about like teen pregnancy. They're never going to get that far.
Boy, was that the case. I think my parents did the little swipe across the forehead and went, whew, when they saw what I was turning out to as a teen. They're like, well, we're fine with this one.
We don't have to worry too much about this. Maybe some scalp kissing here and there. Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm upstairs, reading X-Men 229 for the third time. Like, oh boy, I'm having fun up here in my bedroom reading Wolverine. Oh, no dating on my horizon.
Oh, fastball special.
Oh, Colossus, you can throw. Anyway. Well, on that note, hello everybody and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about making comics.
And making a living from comics. My name is Brad Guigar, editor of webcomics.com and cartoonist of Evil Inc.
My name is Brad Geiger. That was very formal. That was like these people don't know who you are. That was the hand firmly held outstretched of like a business meeting. Hello, my name is Brad Geiger. I'll be dealing with your insurance claim today.
I wasn't looking directly at my notes. I was going from memory.
What is it going to take for us to get the piece of paper near your microphone for the beginning of the show?
I had the paper, but I wanted my mouth to be pointed towards the microphone, so I didn't want to be looking down at it.
This is such a walking and chewing gum scenario. Like, I can only do one thing at a time. I can't talk and look at a piece of paper. You're asking too much of me, David. Too much of me.
We're never going to get through this intro.
I know. I'm so
Brad
sorry.
Geiger. Bop, Evil Inc. Now it's your turn.
All right. And my name is David Joseph Kellett. I'm the cartoonist. I'm the cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and the co-director of a documentary film about comics called Stripped. Nice to meet you all.
And this week's hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. And Dave, let's talk comics.
Well, let's dive right into it, my friend, because we've got a very special guest on the line right now. So let me hit a knob, turn a button. Hit a knob, turn a button.
Maybe don't be hitting any knobs.
And welcome him onto the show. Well, Brad, this is a really exciting moment because one of my favorite artists in the world is joining us today. Tony Cliff, you know him from Delilah Dirk at delilahdirk.com or from bookstores everywhere. The beautiful series of books from First, Second, and Macmillan. And also the travel posters, but we can talk about that in a second. But Tony, thanks for coming on the show. This is fantastic.
Hey. Oh, good morning, or I guess good evening to all your podcast listeners.
Where are you hailing from today? Where do you hang your hat?
I am in beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia. I apologize if my voice is a little raspy. I don't know.
Those Vancouver winters, they'll get you.
You know what? All right, let's take a quick detour into Weathercast. It never snows in Vancouver, but it snowed last night in March 11th. It does not. Canada, yes, the snowy north, the frozen north. It never snows in Vancouver though. It's out, but.
Is that something about the salt air, or the way the wind blows, or what's the truth?
El Nino.
You've never heard me being more Californian, Brad. Like, how does snow work? I don't understand.
You went from sounding very smart to very dumb in like 3 seconds. Is that about the salt air or the wind?
Snow is made the same way you make ice cream.
Well, this is my way of letting Tony know what to expect in chatting with us today. That we're going to go from very smart to very dumb in rapid succession. Like, it's going to go real quick, Tony, real quick.
Well, I'm just going to hang out in real dumb. And if you want to just tag me in whenever you're in the neighborhood, just let me know. That's how we can do that.
So, Brad, I have to share one fun fact before we dive into the show with Tony today. But the last time, or maybe the only time that Tony was in my studio, we're playing pool, and in between shots, there's 3 or 4 of us taking shots, talking. And Tony's whipping out a beautiful sketch off to the side while the rest of us have second knuckle up our nose. And it's one of my favorite originals in my studio is that drawing that you did, Tony, in like record time. So thank you for that.
I aimed to please, I guess. And also quickly.
But were you able to sink the 7 ball?
At the same time, yes.
He was. That's what was amazing about it, Brad. It was a behind the back shot, and he's sketching. He's like using the bridge to take the shot and still sketching. Just a polymath of talent over here.
I'm sorry, I'm still stuck on second knuckle. That's weird.
Yeah, well, that's as you should be. As you should be.
Hey, Tony, anyway, I've got a question I've always wanted to ask you, because there's a lot about what you do that I'd love to emulate, and I don't think I'm going to get to the point where I can emulate your art anytime soon. However, because your art is gorgeous, but There is one thing I can emulate. How are you displaying your e-comic? How are you displaying comic pages on the Delilah Dirk website? Because it's like an opened pages of an e-comic right there on your desktop, and I very much want that for myself. How do you do that?
Oh, that's I that is custom HTML. It used to be a WordPress site.
Oh, I was afraid you were going to
Used to be a
that.
WordPress site when I first put it up, and then I went through some traumatic WordPress experiences. So just stripped out all the WordPress stuff and basically rewrote everything in HTML. So it's all really clumsy. I think I made it in Dreamweaver. When I started doing it, I always intended for it to be a printed graphic novel, and you read a graphic novel, 2 pages at a time, a 2-page spread.
Yeah.
Had to go. So I figured, okay, well, it'll be weird if I try and put that up, especially since I think I had in that first book. Did I have any 2-page spreads? Probably 1 or 2.
No, yeah, you definitely do. Yeah.
But enough that it was worth it to.
Well, and even if they're not spreads, Tony, don't mind me stepping on your answer, but you do really beautiful color flows across a spread. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that they complement one another.
I don't have to take all these compliments, but
you know what? This is how we roll at this show. I'm gonna talk about your fashion choices. I'm gonna talk about your hair. What a winning smile.
We're buttering you up early. We slide the knife in later, but we're buttering you up early.
Yeah, we do it Roman style. So we're gonna come at you when you least expect it.
Nice and relaxed.
Yeah.
Remember. Well, I mean, I was gonna say, like, all of the webcomic templates at the time when I started doing it were 1 page at a time. Or I don't know, they all had like buttons and cruft all over the sides and stuff. So I just like, well, I guess I'll just make this myself.
Yeah. Well, good on you for tackling it because to Brad's point, it works beautifully for the flow of that story. It's really nice.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely. And if you're doing a long form comic, go to DelilahDirk.com and check out what Tony's doing there. It's very much, I do a lot of ranting and raving about particularly long form comics being stuck in 2005. If you take a look at what Tony's doing there, it's very close to the concept that I've been really trying to drive towards and drive others towards. It's more of a landing page. You get there, you get presented with different entry points, different places you can jump into the story. It's a good presentation. It's a solid presentation. And then once you click into it, you're basically reading that e-comic on his site, and it's just phenomenal. I'm a big fan.
Before we jump in on a bunch of reader questions that we have, I wanted to ask you, Tony, because I don't know that I've ever specifically chatted with you about it. Can you give us the quick thumbnail version of your process? Because as Brad has said, your art is stunning. It's gorgeous. And I would like to know how you go about it. Do you start with thumbnails? Do you start with pencil on paper? Do you work purely digitally? How do you do it?
So for those, I guess for your listeners who don't know, each Delilah Dirk book is, maybe a 200-page story, beginning, middle, and end. It's like one long story, one big graphic novel. It all starts in like little sketchy, scribbly thumbnails, or not thumbnails, like word notes, like just all over the place. Once I figure I have enough messy notes, take them, I'll grab them together, sort of put them in an order that makes sense. So it sort of starts to reflect the shape of a story that I can kind of see and be like, oh yeah, this is something that I want to spend a year of my life drawing.
Right.
And then I go with the last 2 books, I've gone through and written a complete manuscript, sort of like a novel style thing, and then taking that, breaking it down, page 1, page 2, page 1, page 2, that sort of thing, sort of designing for those 2-page spreads and that sort of thing, figuring out where that all goes. And then it's a sort of iterative process from there. Like, you said thumbnails. I started with the thumbnails, really, really small sketches, solving the problems of like what is the question that I ask at the bottom right hand of every corner, and what is the surprise that we get every time we turn, to a new 2-page spread. And then you can read the entire book like that if you if you can understand my tiny chicken scratch scrawl.
Yeah.
And then I take the thumbnails, make them a little bit larger next time. So I take a rough pass at the whole thing, solving problems of like expressions and acting, and taking a closer look at what the scenery will look like, making sure all the word balloons will fit. Once that's done, I scan it all in, tighten it up a little bit in Photoshop, clean up all the lettering, and then I've got a rough version of the whole 200-page book that I can send out to trusted readers or editors, and say, does this look like something I should keep spending my time on? Please tell me yes or no.
That all important feedback. Should I jump off a bridge?
Well, like the analogy that I like to give to people is like, if you're a musician or a comedian, you can write a joke or write a song and then go on stage and perform it that night, and you get immediate feedback, right?
Right.
Like people applaud or people laugh and that sort of thing. But if a comic book, if it's not working, you're spending, like I said, you're working on this thing not knowing, is this joke funny, or is this suspenseful enough, or like a good friend of mine pointed at a dumb thing. He's like, hey, why is Salim so worried about how hot it is in this environment? He's from Turkey. Like, why would he care? Like, oh yeah, that's a salient point. So yeah, get that feedback, because I like that feedback. And I don't know about you guys, but I like collaboration, and I like hearing what other people. I think I also come from an animation background, and my favorite thing about animation is getting in that room and at a storyboard handoff or at a script meeting and stuff where you're talking about how to make something funnier and make something better. And
right,
sort of
and it's ping-ponging back and forth.
Yes, I love that. And you don't, and comics is so solitary that it's so nice anytime I can get that. So anyway,
do you find that you miss that on a daily basis? Like, is this Tony a little bit sadder than the animation Tony? Do you know what I mean? No, that sounds terrible. God, I really
I like that better than any other way of describing it. That's good. I do. Yeah, I miss it, but it's like, the grass is always greener, and and they both have their upsides and their downsides and everything. So.
Well, let me ask you this, because you hit on something that Brad always structures his pages for, but it's a little bit different. So, Brad, this might be an interesting point of discussion to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So, Brad always has, and forgive me if I put the words in your mouth, Brad. Brad always has a satisfying beat at the end of each page. He writes that for the end of each page. Whereas you had a slightly different construction where you said at the bottom right page, you have a question that's answered in some exciting or surprising or interesting or adventurous way as you turn the page. So the book then is specifically written for a spread. Is that what I'm understanding? That you write for the spread?
Kind of. So so credit where credit is due. I think I first picked up this notion reading somebody talking about Mike Mignola's work. In animation, I can control everything you see at any given moment in time. I control the exact timing of every image that is displayed on a television screen or a movie screen to you, right?
Right.
With comics and stuff, obviously, you don't get that. Every time a reader turns the page, that page turn is the only time you get a chance to surprise them. Because they can see, and it's not like a novel. A novel is hard to parse when you turn to a new 2-page spread. With a comic book, you can immediately see everything there. You can see the stuff that's on the right-hand page and the left-hand page. And, if a demon pops out of the bushes on the right-hand page, well, then you've got a whole bunch of stuff on the left-hand page there that people maybe just skip by because there's a demon on the right-hand page. That's much more interesting. So I think the notion I heard from reading about Mike Mignola is that I think he tries to leave a question in the reader's mind at the bottom right-hand side corner of every 2-page spread, so that the reader can't help, ideally. So the reader can't help but want to turn that page, right?
Okay. Yeah, I see what you mean. All right.
I mean, that's the way I heard it. I also like the idea of ending with a satisfying beat at the bottom of the corner. If I could figure out how to do that, I would like to try to do that as well. But the question doesn't have to be a big question. It doesn't have to be an overwhelming question. It just has to be something that the reader is curious about. Like if the demon is going to jump out of the bushes on the next hand page, then I don't know, maybe you've got the silhouette of a demon in the background. Like, what is that? What is that thing in the bottom on the previous page? Like, what, there's some element of curiosity there.
Yeah.
Well, Brad, as a point counterpoint, do you want to talk about why and how you go? Because we haven't talked about it in a long time. Why you go for a satisfying or beat on the end of each page?
For me, it comes down to your objective. And Tony and I, when we're doing comics, have two very different objectives. Because I'm, or at least, tell me if I'm wrong, Tony. Tony's optimizing for the book. The book is the most important thing. There's no important thing that is above it. When I'm doing a comic, I need to be building my audience. I need to be growing my audience. And I've got to give a whole lot more significance to how it appears on the web, specifically how it's going to be used on social media so I can continue to grow my audience.
Right, okay.
So what I'm doing is I'm actually putting something hopefully significant every half page, because I'm posting those in half page installments on the site. A half a page is about all I can get through on Instagram and Line Tunes and so forth. So what I'm trying to do is insert places into that story that is, if it's not a point of humor, it's a point of surprise, it's a plot point, it's something every half page, so that I can continually be posting those on social media and hopefully building my audience. Now, does that mean that Tony's right and I'm wrong?
Absolutely.
No. Or does that mean that I'm right and Tony's wrong?
I just appreciated the interjection of absolutely.
No, but it just means that there's two different objectives, and Tony's in a different place in his career than I am, and he's in a place where he's maximizing that book, and the publishing is the big thing. For me, I've got to be in that audience building mode, and so my objectives are going to be a little bit different. They're both fantastic ways, and by the way, that's something that I'm continually trying to make sure that is present in my stories as well, keeping that page flop into mind, because I'm telling you, that whole demon out of the bushes that Tony mentioned is something that is a pet peeve of mine. Right, where you've got something happening that's way distracting on that right-hand page, and it's like, oh man, I gotta read through all this left-hand page before I can get to the demon. Forget about it. I'm going right to the demon. So that's a really good point about leaving that right-hand bottom page with a surprise in store for the flop. I think that's a great way to put it.
Well, you know what? I've never vocalized this before, but it really does speak to the fact that if you've got a lot of exposition or a lot of pipe to lay, boy, do it on the right page. Don't do it on the left page.
Yeah.
Because you want to Tony's point, you want the big payoff on that left-facing page, and let the right be like, all right, when I was a child and I was 9, blah, 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 and it's like monologue. And then you flip the page and you see Colossus throwing Wolverine for the Speedball special or whatever it is.
This is really fascinating. I'd never really considered this. Yes, because like Delilah Dirk was designed initially to be read as one big graphic novel.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that's how I enjoyed reading all my books when I was growing up. Like I would just chew through. I guess this isn't the best example, but I'd chew through a big thick book of Calvin and Hobbes. Like just start to finish, right? And of course, that's designed differently. That is designed specifically to have 3 solid punchlines every page.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But yeah, if I were designing it specifically to be posting it every day, then yeah, it would be a much better idea to give the reader something like that. I mean, I guess they're both probably good approaches, like to either give the reader something satisfying, make them laugh, or make them feel like, oh, good, haha, good, excellent conclusion,
right.
Or to be like, oh, well, I want to come back tomorrow and find out more about this.
Right. Well, it's so funny because it speaks to how we all have to fit whatever fishbowl we're put into. And by that, I mean, like, when Arthur Conan Doyle's writing Hound of the Baskervilles, he's not releasing that as a full novelette. he's releasing it as little chunks. So there's a reason why some of those little chapter endings are like, oh boy, that was an exciting ending. Oh, how is Sherlock going to get out of this? And it's because it was, it was being released as a chunk in whatever it was, the Strand or the Evening Post. I don't remember what it was. But, so like Brad doing it page by page is virtuous for his release cycle, and you doing it by spread is virtuous for your reader experience. But it's interesting just to do a quick compare and contrast, because they both serve the greater good, which is what keeps the reader coming back. And in your case, it's to flip the page. In Brad's case, it's to click the next time there's a click to be clicked for the clicking.
Right. And what I find, just having looked back over my history in storytelling, when I didn't keep myself to a framework like that, when I wasn't holding my own feet to the fire as a writer, I tend to meander. Right? I tend to go off into the weeds. I get distracted by a butterfly and wander off and follow that butterfly for a week or two. I get very easily distracted as a storyteller, and having that framework, having that necessity to have a solid story beat on a regular basis every half page, and to keep in mind issues like that, and also just keeping myself, okay, I've given myself 21 pages. And the story has to move from this point to that point in 21 pages, and I've got it all charted out how it's going to go. Having those frameworks applied helps me from meandering too much and writing a murky story. It keeps things punchy. It keeps things clicking along. I think some of the earlier stories I wrote tended to bore readers because I wasn't keeping myself to a format, and that format helps me a lot. What do you think about that?
I've been thinking about that a lot lately. And I used to be, I think for the last probably, so I guess I started like participating in the Flight Comics thing like mid 2000s, 2005, 2006 or something. But like for the past decade or stuff, I'd read story advice books, script writing books, novel writing books, and they'd all have armatures or structures or, the 3-act design type thing. Be like, I swear, for the last decade, I just say under my breath, like, man, screw that. Like, I don't need to do that. Like, we can make a good story without any of these constraints, without any of these limitations, without any of these, like shortcomings or whatever. Yeah, without these shackles.
I'm picturing you with like beads around your neck and like strumming a hand pulled drum, and you're like, you know what, man? There's no limitations on storytelling. We can do whatever we want, man.
No, it's. I mean, yeah, kind of, but also a little bit of like the petulant teenager just saying, like, you can't tell me what to do.
You're not the boss of me.
Yeah.
Mom, I don't need to have satisfying beats in my story, Mom. You don't need to tell me.
No, that is me. That is closer to me. I am a
good. We're getting to the true Tony. That's great.
I am a dyed-in-the-wool contrarian.
Yeah.
Like you say something, you say the sky is blue. I'm like, well, could be gray today.
Yeah.
It's like, this is all to bring around to say, like, I have started to really appreciate those constraints. And on the more recent projects, I've been, like the page turn design stuff, other methods of structuring a story. I've really started to appreciate them and have come around to the point of view of like, oh, these are more useful than they are a handicap.
Yeah.
Right.
So that is a tale of my personal growth.
Ting!
I don't know. So which I mention only because, like maybe you've got listeners out there who are in the same boat as me in the way I was like, why are you telling me all about this? Like, designing, for every other page and that sort of thing. Like that sounds annoying and unnecessary. I'm like, well, yes, it is initially, but then if you can find a way to love it, I think sometimes it comes around and you can turn that enemy into an ally.
Well, isn't it also a creativity challenge as well? In other words, if you talk, and this goes across the board, when you talk about artists who have all of a sudden found themselves in a very restrictive environment, they find themselves with a lot of rules out in front of them. That is the test of creativity. That's a real creativity challenge is to make something good and keep it within that framework. Not the way you follow the directions on the box of Kraft macaroni and cheese, right? You're not measuring this out to the milliliter. But and you can skip a step, you can improvise, you've got that ability. But if you are keeping yourself into that structure, that forces you to really bring the full weight of your creativity to bear. And that's what brought me to comics. I wanted an opportunity to be creative, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I tend to really appreciate those opportunities that structure brings me, because I know that's going to be where I'm going to really bring my full creativity to bear.
So, Brad, you said that's what brought you to comics, but I have a memory that what brought you to comics was that nobody was smooching you in high school. That was my memory of what.
That's the other thing that brought me to comics. They both, let me tell you. Well, listen, in either case, Dave, I was dealing with some severe limitations.
We have our fun, Tony. We have our fun. Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics. Tony, let me ask you our first question from a listener, and this one's kind of fun because this one was directed to Brad and I originally.
I'm still just stuck on, like, I got into comics for this smooching.
Yeah, that was a false goal.
I feel like if anything, comics has done very much the opposite for me.
Yeah, that's true. For all of us. Doon. That's one to grow on, everybody. All right. So here is our first listener question for Tony and for all three of us. So this is from Jay Lark. Out of curiosity, Tony, do you consider yourself first and foremost a cartoonist, quote unquote, an artist, quote unquote, a comic creator, etc.? Which term would you use to explain what you do when you're introducing yourself to someone? Are there any differences in the definitions or perceptions of each term that would cause you to choose one over another? I love this question.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jay.
This is a very thoughtful question.
Yeah. So first pass, we're at a party. You're quickly introducing yourself. Hi, I'm Dave Kellett. I'm an accountant for a local CPA office. Who are you?
That's not true. Wait a minute. Oh, I see.
I'm role-playing, Tony.
Oh, I see what you did there. I am also an accountant, and I know lots of things about accounting. Please ask me no follow-up questions. Would you like another hors d'oeuvre? I've made macaroni and cheese. I followed the directions explicitly.
What kind of dip is this? Let's talk about that.
I tell people that if depending on the audience, I tell people either that I'm an animator, easy question to answer. Very few follow-up questions with animation, except that you have to explain to people that computers don't do all of the work anymore, or don't do all of the work. Or I tell people I make comics, and that's it.
Okay. So the word comics or comic creator the word cartoonist or comic creator or artist never comes up. It's always I make. You use the active verb I make comics. That's the way you would describe it.
Basically, yes.
That's interesting. And why do you like the active verb more than the title? I mean, clearly you do, but I guess that question is why.
Man, do you want to drill down real deep into like identity politics? And
as long as it's not boring, yes, we do, Tony.
Because it's if we're talking about identity politics, we obviously get to acknowledge the fact that we are three privileged white men sitting around a computer talking about making funny laughing pictures.
Absolutely, yeah. That bears into the conversation.
I don't know. The first thing that came to mind is like the distinction that some people make between graphic novels and comic books.
Uh-huh.
And I really like. I think Jake Parker said it to me. He said all graphic novels are comic books, but not all comic books are graphic novels.
Ah.
Which I like, because I think of graphic novels as, and I worked with for a second to make a brochure along these lines. Like, graphic novels are just thick comic books, I think. Otherwise, I don't think there's any distinction. I think a lot of people put a lot of baggage in there about the type of content that is in a graphic novel versus the type of content that is in something that you would call a comic book. But both mediums have the capacity to be as much of
move you, tell a story, transport you,
yeah, absolutely. So
wow, once again though, Brad, Jake Parker bringing the wisdom even from afar. This is
oh boy, and leave it to Jake Parker to bring it in the form of an SAT question.
We have a running gag about Jake, who we both love dearly. Okay, so you choose I make comics. That's interesting. I like that. I like that because I've never heard someone choose the active verb over the title, and I find that interesting and fascinating about you.
What do you tell people, Dave?
I tend to say cartoonist, although that, to Tony's point, that immediately raises four other questions, because then they say, "Oh, what show do you work on?" Because I live in LA, and then I say, "Oh, no, I don't. I don't work on a show." And I say my follow up statement, because I've kind of refined it, is I say, I draw basically whatever you would have come to expect in a newspaper, except it's on the internet, and that satisfies most people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not going to drill down into Drive, being like, well, it's kind of a serialization like the 1930s comics, except it's on the like, I'm not going to give them too much. No grandmother's going to care about that, so I just say it's like what you would have read in the newspaper, but except it's online. But I'm a cartoonist. How about you, Brad? What do you tend to say?
It all depends on how much I want to talk to the person.
That's a good point.
And I'm being completely serious. If I don't want, and like 90% of the time, if I really don't want to have a conversation with the person, I'll say I'm a graphic artist and leave it at that, because that leaves absolutely no. I've never gotten a follow-up question on that. It just sounds pretty boring. If I want to talk, if I feel like there might be some interesting engagement to be had there, I'll specifically use cartoonist for two reasons. Because number one, it's going to, like you said, it's going to get lots of questions are going to be raised. People are going to be interested in general about a cartoonist. It's a unique avocation. It's a unique thing to do for a living. And number two, cartoonist was what 12-year-old Brad wanted to be more than anything else.
Oh,
and so when I use that word, it's a way of satisfying, because now I finally, it took me a long time to get here, but I really do feel like I am doing this at a professional level now. I feel proud of the little bit that I have accomplished, and I using that word is a reward to 12-year-old Brad, who stuck it out, getting through a lot of drawing not so great, a lot of writing jokes that nobody understood. And that was as recently as Tuesday.
Self-deprecation. I do appreciate it.
But yeah, that cartoonist was an important word to me, and so I give that to myself.
Yeah.
Well, self-deprecation is a good call out here. But so did you guys both say cartoonist?
I think we did. Yeah.
You guys probably agree. Like, cartoonist feels like it carries feels a lot more humble, maybe, than saying I am an author, I am an artist,
or graphic novelist.
Yes, that sort of thing, right?
Well, okay, so if we do want to break this down, to me, graphic novelist, or the term graphic novel, always felt like the VP at one of the mid-tier publishers needed a marketing term that could sell across genres. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that's what I don't default it. I mean, I don't fault it, and I don't dislike it per se. To me, it always felt like a marketing term. It's like everything you love about comics, except there are feelings in it. You know, that kind of thing. That's what graphic novel as a marketing term kind of felt like to me.
Right.
Whereas comics, I love as a term, because it is, to me, the highest of the high and the lowest of the low in terms of comedy or art or styles or genres or approaches.
It feels like there's a lot more potential there.
Yeah, it's very encompassing as a term to me. Whereas to my parents' generation, comics might have felt like bubblegum wrapper, that kind of stuff. It's interesting how, for me as an artist, comics are very encompassing, whereas for a lot of maybe older people, comics are very non-inclusive as what they can be.
Right.
But you're right, though, Brad. I've never used the term, and maybe you could speak to this too. I've never used the term author, and I've never used the term artist. I mean, maybe I've used artist if someone follows up, but have either of you ever called yourself an artist or an author?
Not intentionally.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like only if I'm in like a French speaking tour and I'm being offered some very fine cheese, do I say I'm an author?
And that's because nobody's going to understand you.
That's right. More often than not, they're going to ask me for more cheese. Excuse me, sir, garçon, more cheese over here. Who's the unshaven one? Oh, that's the waiter. Okay.
Un petit fromage.
Yeah, exactly. Tony, have you ever called yourself an author or an artist?
I spent 2 years at fine art school learning about, like art history and modern art and all that sort of thing. And it made me very aware that was not the type of thing that I wanted to be. I did not want to equate myself to the people that I saw around me at art school who seemed to want to be artists more than they wanted to make anything.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Now, I was young, so maybe this was just like a little bit of like, I don't know, anger maybe coming out or something. But like, I don't know. Ever since then, I've always just wanted to put the emphasis on the craftsmanship of it or the craftspersonship of it, as opposed to the title.
Right. So when people in a studio review, when a fellow student would bring out a painting and everyone would snap their approval, were you the one person in the class like, I am not snapping. I am not snapping.
I did my right, my beret and my
exactly, your tiny little cigarette perched on your lip. Yeah.
I remember specifically that like I participated as best I could, but if somebody did a painting and you couldn't think. If nobody could think of anything nice to say about it, they'd just be like, I really like the colors.
Yeah.
That was just by the end of the 2 years, I came to understand that as code for like, I got nothing to say about this.
You seem to have applied some goop onto a canvas, so I'm going to comment on the goop itself.
The materiality of it.
Yeah.
Those are some really nice brushes.
All right, Brad. Well, why don't you take us into the next the listener question for Tony and the rest of us here?
That sounds good. So this comes in from our good friend Seth Wolfshorndal, who says, when it is deadline crunch time and you have several strips or pages that must be finished very soon, do you folks have any tips for maximizing your workflow efficiency? For example, do you pencil all of them and then ink all of them and so forth? Or would you finish each strip or each page completely before moving on to the others? I ask you this, Tony Cliff.
Do you guys get into deadline crunch?
Not as much as I imagine you do. So it is probably best that you jump in first, because Brad and I have more of a regularity that's like a breathing beat or a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Whereas you, I imagine, as the publishing deadline looms, are like, oh God, what have I done? I need to produce 35 more pages.
I mean, I'm going to knock on wood here at the start of saying any of this, just to sort of like, caution myself. I don't know. I make a really strong effort to never be in a deadline crunch situation.
Mm-hmm.
And long story short, like I burn extra calories to make sure that I am never doing overnighters. And this has been pretty consistent throughout like high school and animation school. Everything is just like, I'm just going to pace myself and stay on top of this.
Well, but before you go far in that, let me ask you, do you work it out with like a calendar or an Excel sheet and say, okay, this needs to be due in 6 months if I do 3 pages every 3 days? Like, how do you break it down for yourself?
Yeah.
All the penciling needs to be done by this date. All the inking needs to be done by this date. Or do you do like, I need to have 40 pages done by this date?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I'm saying all this knowing that I turned in Delilah Dirk 3 a little bit late.
So, Brad, we can throw this entire section right out the window. Then. That's what we're going to do. Tony just admitted that, like, so my strategy with deadlines, Brad and Dave, is I ignore them. That's what I do.
I'm not. Yes, kind of. Is the answer to that.
But is that in service of the book being the best it can be? Was that your idea for that one?
I always try to hit those deadlines as best I can. But if it looks like so with DD3, it became clear that like I was not going to get this in on at the time that we agreed upon. So it was just a matter of talking to my editor, and I'm like, this is what's realistic. Like I could murder myself to do this, but then and the book would probably still be basically more or less the same, but like I saw it coming a few months ahead of time, and I hired a bunch of some friends and some professionals to come in and help with the color prep for the book to try to save some time there. And in the end, I think I probably only handed it in a month late. Whereas if I tried to color the whole thing myself, it would have been, I don't know, 4 or 5 months late, that sort of thing. But I'm just not working in a scenario where the deadlines are super exacting. Now, if my editor Callista is ever listening to this, those dedeadlines are super exacting, and I do always hit them.
Just a little doff of the cap as he walks out the door. And to any other publishers that are listening, I'm happy to work professionally.
But no, I don't know. I feel like there is a professional way to handle the idea of
Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me like you handled it much the way Kazu has done with Amulet in the past, which is when you see it coming, when you know it's coming, the best thing to do is just be upfront, clear, and professional in your communication, and that sounds like what you did.
And to date, I don't think anybody has been burned by it, and except for DD3, I mean, I do everything I can, literally everything I can, to make sure that I'm ready for that date.
Well, the one thing I'll jump in on this for me when on the rare occasions where I do have something due and it's a significant chunk. And Brad, you can tell me if this is different than what you do is. I try to gamify it for myself. And what I mean by that is there are some people for whom the satisfaction comes when they're like, all the penciling is done at once. Now all the inking is done. Now all the colors are done. Whereas for me, my gamification is to level up with each page being completely done. So I like to tackle them whole cloth, pencils, ink, color, lettering, bam, that page is done. And it feels to me, maybe gamifying is not the right word, but it feels to me like an advancement onto a bigger, as part of a bigger adventure. When I get one done, it is over here on the pile. That one's done. Now it's on to the next one. How about you, Brad?
In general, I agree with what both of you are saying. However, speaking of being contrarians, I will say this. In other words, now that I'm doing a more of a graphic novel, I do exactly what you're talking about. I'll pencil the page, I'll letter the page, I'll ink the page, I'll hand it off to my colorist, and I'll go on to the next page. However, when I was doing a 6-day-a-week comic strip, I found that I could generate a whole lot more speed if I did the entire week in pencils, and then I lettered the entire week, and then I inked the entire week. I could get into an inking groove, for example. You kind of get into a groove when you're working on certain parts of this, and doing a strip to completion. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to get all the way to the end of the week, you can't get into that groove. So due to the constraints of a strip, I liked setting up an assembly line where I could do all my penciling and then all my inking and stuff like that. But with a larger chunk like graphic novel pages, I tend to attack those exactly the same way that you folks are describing, and that is by penciling the whole thing as a unit and bringing it to completion and then moving on to the next page.
Yeah, I find that anytime you've got to switch gears, I always lose some momentum or some energy there.
Yeah.
Well, this is great. So both of you are taking a huge shit on my the way I do it. So that's great. I feel great about myself right now. I'm going to go that bridge that Tony was talking about before. I'm going to go throw myself off of that one. So that's no.
David, when you were doing back in the day, you were doing Sheldon and putting those things out there daily without fail and holding that rigid schedule that, like we've talked about this show so many times, you had to do back in the early days of the web because it was an ad supported system. Is that what you were doing back then too?
Well, okay, so I was being self-denigrating because I do agree with both of you that and Tony hit it on the head. Anytime you switch tasks, you absolutely lose a big chunk of momentum. And the way I know that is when I draw Sheldon, which is still drawn pen and ink, my computer is off to the side, it's turned off, and it's just music, brushes, pens, and paper, right? And when I draw Drive, it's digital, and all these little notifications pop up while I'm drawing.
Oh, yeah.
And dear God, does that distract me? And like every once in a while, there'll be an email where you glance over at, the little header that pops up on an Apple. And if it's something important that I've been waiting on and I switch over to it, it takes me a big chunk of time to get back into the groove of drawing after I switch gears on that task.
Oh yeah, because then your ability to work becomes like little Jeffy in Family Circus because you go over to the email and then you got to take a left turn and stop over by Twitter and then you head around to Facebook, you come around to Instagram, you check 3 or 4 more sites and then finally you get back to working on Drive. It's never a direct line. You always go, take the long way home.
Yeah, and then, you have that moment where having checked the 9 other informational inputs that you could check, you're standing there with your Wacom pen in your hand going, wait, what was I doing? Oh, drawing. I was drawing.
Oh,
and then you get back to it, and you're like, what a dummy. Why did I let myself get, 15 minutes into a rabbit hole?
I did that literally twice yesterday. I picked up my phone with the intention of searching for something, like, show me the tide tables. And I pick it up, and it's got... like a Twitter notification, this other thing. And then, 15 minutes later, I put it down. I'm like, wait a minute. Something feels unaccomplished here.
The tide tables.
Something feels like
I've done the same exact thing.
Oh, it's so bad. Whose idea was it to put notifications on desktop computers?
I don't know, but I dislike it.
Apple, why can't you just turn that off like whole cloth? So angry.
I do wish that, and I know that there are third-party apps that can do it, but I wish there was like a master switch on your Cintiq that you could just go working, not working, and when you hit it, when you physically flip that little switch, all the notifications go off, all the email goes off, the internet maybe even turns off aside from Dropbox linking. And oh boy, that would make my life so much better.
I did have an app like that. It was called Concentrate.
Concentrate, okay.
Oh, is that right?
And it would shut down, it would like basically block. Like I just set it up to block Firefox from even opening. And that did it for me. That was enough.
And did you stop using it because the app no longer updates, or?
I don't remember. I think I might have did a clean install on my computer and just never got around to.
Right. Okay. The only reason I ask is I'm kind of curious to try it. So it probably still exists, though, right? Oh, it looks like it does. Okay.
If it doesn't, something similar to it.
Yeah,
there are a few of those out there.
Well, anyway, we're coming to the end of the road, and I want to say thank you for Tony for coming on, man. This was really lovely to talk with you about. And I honestly, gosh, I never would have thought someone would self-describe as I make comics, and I find that really insightful and interesting in a way that I'm probably putting too much meaning on now that makes you feel uncomfortable. But anyway, I want to thank you for coming on, and your art continues to inspire and be beautiful. And thank you for creating such wonderful things. My family especially loves your storytelling. We really enjoy reading it. So thank you for that.
Oh man, well, thank you so much. That is, you're making my day over here. Come on.
Yeah, and I just want to chime in on that. Dave's family really enjoys your storytelling. I'm teasing, Tony. I just couldn't resist. It was set up much too nicely.
These are the jokes, Tony. Sorry, that's what we're stuck with.
Well, you know I'm in awe of you. I'm so thrilled you had a chance to hang out with us today.
Hey, thanks for letting me hang out and chat about making comics with you. It feels like I just sit in front of that desk all day, all the time, just thinking about like, oh, what I could do this. Oh, what about? And yeah, to be able to air some of all that pent up like cogitation. Yeah, it's nice to know. So thank you for inviting me.
Well, that's what we're here for, is to get your cogitation out. We want to get them cogitating.
That's a word, right? I sure hope
yeah,
so.
no, that works. We're going to let that pass. Well, but I do want to say, though, that if you are not familiar with Tony's work, really do yourself a favor. It is some of the most beautifully drawn and elaborate adventures and that you will ever see. DelilahDirk.com. And again, in any bookstore from First Second, but it's DililahDirk.com and DelilahDirk.com. And Tony, thank you again for being on here. You are awesome, man.
It's my pleasure.
Hey, you've been listening to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been, and you remember him from his big introduction at the top of the show. His name is Bradley J. Guigar. He's the editor of webcomics.com and the cartoonist of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And David J. Kellett, co-director of Switch.
I'm the co-director of Swift. Oh, there we go. That movie that everybody loved, Swift.
and Dave Kellett, the co-director of Stripped and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And next week, I'm going to be emailing Brad a PDF so he can look at the script as we do the intro.
Right here.
Oh, goodness. And the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by the very talented Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions at www.woodsong.media.
Comic Lab is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So we're going to go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/comiclab.